everyone, and welcome to Something Wicked DocuFest 2024. We are so glad to be back this year. We have a lot of great films that we've screened over the weekend, and we've met a lot of different filmmakers from all over the world, which is actually impressive. And one of the great things that we're still doing with these filmmaker interviews and panel discussions. And today we are going to talk to the filmmakers behind the film Tax Broke. I almost got a tongue tied in my mouth. Tax Broke. We're going to let them explain a little bit about their film so that when you get to watch it, whether it's at our film festival or another event, you get a better idea of the film itself and the filmmakers behind the film. So, you two, welcome to our little show. And I would love for you to tell everyone exactly who you are first, what you did on the film, and a little bit about your film.
Should I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, hi, my name is Taya Graham. I'm a producer, and I would say I shot 50% of the documentary Tax Broke. I'm actually a senior investigative reporter at the Real News Network, and I am also the narrator of the film. And I'm here with the director, Stephen Janis.
Yeah, my name is Stephen Janis, and I directed the film and scored it and scripted it, kind of stuff. So, we kind of share 50-50 in the duty. So, I've been doing documentary films for a while because I went from print journalism to television to video. And, we've done a variety of films, The Friendliest Town, which was, out in 2021, and we're working on another one. So, yeah, I've been in documentary filmmaking for a couple of years now.
But the only thing I would add to that is that we are independent documentary filmmakers. So it's like a very much a farm to table process. We pretty much handle every single aspect from shooting to editing. He does the scoring. There's pretty much no part of it that we don't do. I even did the color grading. So
Okay. No, that's good to know. I know a lot of filmmakers out there who will be listening and watching this want to know your perspective on exactly what you did on your film, because it is a lot of grassroots filmmakers out there who may be attempting their first film here. So, Tax Broke, tell us a little bit about that, because I want to dig into exactly what your film is about and how you achieved this film.
It's a story about how a government that's purported to serve the people and to, have good policy actually ends up making a handful of people rich. And it's a story of how we got there in a city like Baltimore, which is, has wide swaths of poverty, impoverished residents, and ended up, giving these big tax breaks to developers. Now, of course, the challenge of a film like that is that buildings going up and stuff is only so dramatic, and but we thought that the story is never really told. And, the story in Baltimore is a city that's been politically isolated, racially segregated, redlined, and a variety of other things. It pushed us in a corner where the city had to give away the store basically to get people to develop. And so, but we wanted to wrap that into a narrative that people could connect with so that they could see this history unfolding, understand the context, and also understand the complexity behind some of these processes that sound, sort of obscure, but end up being quite instrumental in how people live, right? Because the way a city is built, the way a city is taxed, the way public resources are used has tremendous impact on the lives of the people that live there. And many times, that story is not connected or told in any way that makes sense to people. So that was kind of our goal. It was a tough goal because it's just, like I said, you're talking about buildings, construction, backdoor deals that you're not going to be able to witness. And so you have to find a way to tell that story. And I think that was the instrumental part of Tax Broke.
I would add to that Stephen did, we're both investigative journalists, but he had to also kind of create like a narrative train to pull it forward, because in this investigation that Stephen started and I began assisting him with, he essentially uncovered these acronyms that sound, as obscure as they are, innocent, TIFs, TIFS, pilots, these acronyms that just, these don't seem like they cause any harm, but they are actually literally shaping the skyline of our city. So we did investigation into TIFs, which is tax increment financing, and pilots, payment in lieu of taxes, which are tax subsidies, a form of credit that are given to developers to create structures and buildings in the city, usually with the promise that they're going to create some affordable or inclusionary housing, create jobs, attract population, things of that nature. And to put it very, very simply, essentially the property taxes in a TIF, all the projected value of the building and what the property is going to be worth, the taxes that would have been paid to the city instead are given upfront to the developer to use for infrastructure. However, there's no accounting of exactly how those funds are used. So imagine all the property taxes for the next 30 years on your home. Instead, you get it up front and you get to do with it what you like. So you can see what a bonus that is, what a benefit that is. So essentially, our city was making people who were millionaires multimillionaires, and at the same time creating buildings, offices, housing in areas that perhaps didn't need the building and housing there. So it was literally shaping our city, and we wanted to understand why and who it was benefiting, because we certainly saw who it was punishing.
You know, you just explained everything I was about to ask, because your film has so many complex ideals behind it, but you try and create a narrative, like you said, that will easily explain it. I will tell you this. I tell everybody when I watch your films, because I'm not judging them like my jury members do, I watch the films completely blind. So I don't know what I'm getting into when I'm watching these movies. And I am so glad that you two had created a narrative to explain these things, because I had no idea what you were talking about when I first started to watch it. I was like, what? I've never even heard of any tips. I've never heard of these concepts. These are things I've never had a inkling to know how much they affect the poor communities and stuff like that. Where, as you just said, make rich people richer and make the poor neighborhoods even poorer. The thing that you just explained was brilliant, is the way that you also did in the film, and I want to congratulate you on that. I'm not using the right word right now, but I want to congratulate you on that, because you took a very complex idea, both of you, and you kind of streamlined it for someone like me who had no clue whatsoever.
Here we did that effectively.
I mean, I think that's like, I think that's why I like to make documentary films, is try to go into an area that would be, because film is so powerful in terms of storytelling mechanism, and film simplifies in many ways. It's not like a print article, which I've written plenty of those. If you don't winnow it down and get it moving forward with some momentum, it's not going to work. People aren't going to watch it. But if you can achieve that, people will watch it and will be impacted by it. And that, I know it was kind of masochistic to decide to do this, but I just felt somehow we had to evince how this process was working against the ideal of Baltimore, which is in this push for equity. And, after Freddie Gray, which everyone who might, I don't know who doesn't, but Freddie Gray was killed in police custody, murdered, I believe, in police custody. And, all these pushes to like make a more equitable city. And yet, on the other hand, they were doing this thing. And like you said, it's purposeful to come up with these acronyms and these processes, because it just sounds like so boring. Who cares? But really underneath it is this great tale of how inequality is manufactured in our country.
And I would just add to that, just like you said, these acronyms, TIFs, pilots, the enterprise zones, brownfields credits, these things sound so boring. Can you imagine as an independent filmmaker saying, hey, would you like to support us doing a documentary on TIFs? Would you like to give us a grant for that? Would you like to give us money for that? So this was a labor of love. We really wanted to inform our city. And one thing that I really was pleased by is that once we showed it, people wanted us to come into their community and screen it. We screened it in churches, we screened it in schools, we screened it in the basement of our own building. People really wanted to learn more about it, because it was like information. It was as if people understood that there was something occurring in our city that was moving money out of taxpayer pockets and into the pockets of the wealthy. You could see what was happening, but the information on exactly why it was happening just wasn't available. So it was sort of like we opened the door to reveal what was really going on. And once people got a hold of that information, they wanted to run with it. I really would like to think that it's helped reignite a conversation around affordable housing and inclusionary housing in our city.
One thing you have to realize in what was very important narratively to this film, there's always this sense when you're constructing a narrative that you want to contravene conventional wisdom. And so the conventional wisdom in Baltimore was that we were a failed city, and that because we were a failed city, we didn't deserve equitable development.
Oh,
And that narrative is completely false. And that's one of the things that we wanted to prove. It's not true. What is true is that this Baltimore City was intentionally designed to fail in many ways. And, I think a lot of it has to do with racism. And, a lot of it has to do with greed. But we wanted to sort of contradict that narrative. And that was what was important about this film.
okay. So I have to ask this because I know a lot of young filmmakers out here trying to find a subject matter for their film. How did you two come across wanting to do a film like this on this subject matter? Because this is not something a typical type of filmmaker is going to go out there and attempt. If you shed a little light on how you came upon this ideal for a film, that may be very helpful for some of our younger filmmakers out there.
Yeah, like I said before, and I'll just start if that's okay.
Absolutely, sure.
Is that the main thing you want to look? My advice, this is just my advice, is always look for uncharted territory, or some angle when you're approaching storytelling that you can tell a story that no one has told before.
Mhm.
And while these projects would come up like a TIFF or a pilot deal in spurts, no one ever connected the dots, and so I saw a lack there, a lack of connecting the dots, a lack of telling the story cohesively, a lack of connecting the parts that make this all work, so to speak. And I think if you're searching for a story, first of all, you want to search for a story that no one's told, or an angle to that story that no one has heard before. I mean, the main, just like a journalist, when you want to report news because it's new, and I think the main thing you look for is what is that angle, or what could be served by a longer, broader explication. And of course, on top of that, you have to remember as independent filmmakers, we're competing against all the variety of media that comes out. So you want to do something that you can certainly have some advantage in the fact that you see something that someone else doesn't. Because if you just try to glom onto like any topic that's being covered widely by the mainstream media, it's going to be very tough to get anybody to watch it.
I would just add to that, and this is an analogy that Stevens used that when he brought that up, and sort of charting your own path, either revealing information, doing what we would call enterprise journalism or investigative journalism, charting territory that hasn't been charted before, finding an angle or connecting the dots in a way that hasn't been done before, or something that's also really important to me as an investigative journalist is telling a story and providing information help people hold power accountable. If that information can actually be utilized, if it's beneficial, if it's information you can hand someone and they can take off running with it, then that's good information. It's valuable. It's valuable if only 5 people benefit from using that information and show up to City Hall, or if it's 100,000 people. But with this, Stephen made such a good point, and the analogy he uses is that one of the most important reasons we need to have that angle, that freshness, that newness, that uncharted territory is because we're playing in the big leagues. Just because we're little independent journalists that had to do this on our own doesn't mean that we're not up against Netflix documentaries and New York Times documentaries competing for people's attention. It's like we're playing in the NFL. And, we're the best high school team ever in our state, but we're going up against the Ravens. It doesn't matter if we're the best high schoolers in our state. Do you know what I mean? We're going to get smashed if we play on their terms, if we cover their territory. But if we chart your own territory as an independent filmmaker, then you have a better chance of breaking through. At least that's our hope.
No, that's a great analogy. I love that analogy, and I'm hoping that the people watch.
It's his.
I hope they take a lot from what you just said, because that is absolutely correct, and that's great. That's great. So, because of the nature of your investigative journalism for this subject matter, how long did it take to make this film? How much? How much time did you put in? Oh, I saw the look on your face.
We started this film in 2018.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, documentaries just take forever, I mean, one of the things was, as you'll know in the film we show, time has to pass to be able to see what happened with these deals, to get a sense of how the city benefited or didn't benefit, who benefited. You can't just, you need to wait it out a little bit. And so we just, sometimes we would not work on it for months at a time and just wait to see what was going on. Yeah. And then when, we had some results and data, so it was a long, and I mean, we made another documentary in between that. So it was but it was just, but it actually worked out okay because you just have to kind of see how these things flesh out. I mean, development is a long-term topic, it can take 10 years to realize a project. So
I was thinking about seems we have a penchant for doing documentaries that take way too long to shoot. So for our other documentary, The Friendliest Town, we were covering a small town on the eastern shore of Maryland, and we literally had to cover the firing of a police chief, the investigation into why he was fired, the trial that occurred, the community response, the community trying to run different members for city council, things like that. We were literally like following a political awakening in a community that literally took like 5 years to document. In this case, when trying to, we're literally charting the rise of these buildings. And for example, we're looking to see, there was a particular lawsuit to see, it was the Able Foundation, to see if they were going to get information about some of the benefits that were occurring with the sales of a particular building. So we're filing Public Information Act requests. We're trying to see if other people's lawsuits are going to bring forth information. We've spoken to, city council members and senators who say, to us behind the scenes, I'm going to push for transparency here. I'm going to try to push for a public database here, things like that. So there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. So we're waiting for this information to drop into our hands. So one of the things we had to do, because we're looking at each other and was like, we are at a stalemate. We can't squeeze any more information out of our city. And so we're like, well, you know what? We need to show the process. We need to show what that fight looks like, how hard we're fighting to get that information.
Yeah. Which is, I remember watching the movie and you showing I guess the resolution of some of those deals towards the third act of the film. Try to remember.
Yeah. We did like a walk and talk. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So because one of my questions was I wanted to know if you two both shot all the footage or if there was any archival footage used in your film. Because I didn't know when you started the film versus when you ended the film. That's why I wanted to know the timeline, because that's an important aspect for documentary filmmaking. And someone may start off archival footage and then they're only filming the end of it. So I wanted to get like the timeline.
Yeah. Absolutely. So the film, the stuff you see from 2015, from the Freddie Gray uprising to the first TIFF, that was all stuff we shot or someone at our office shot in the Real News. And so we started shooting it. Then we shot that stuff ourselves and we ended up using it. I would say we started shooting the interviews that we used in 2018, but like we had been covering it before that.
Right.
So that like you'll see shots of like meetings where they decide to approve these deals that were shot before that. I would say we started like interviewing people in their office or whatever, or doing the sit down interviews in 2018, and then we did another set of sit down interviews in 2022, which is when we started to like kind of reassess the what had happened. So there were kind of 2018, there was a lot of activity, and then 2022 there was a lot of activity, and then over the time we just covered stuff in between. We did use some archival footage, some public domain of the city of Baltimore from the 70s and the 60s to give people a sense of how it looked, and some archival photographs. So we did use some, but it wasn't a lot.
No, it wasn't much at all. And we were in a unique situation in that we had been reporting and covering, city council meetings and protests. For example, there was a TIFF given to former Under Armour CEO Kevin Plank, and it was a TIFF to develop this area called Port Covington, and it was for, I believe, roughly $560 million. It's one of the biggest TIFFs in the history of our state and one of the biggest in the country that has ever been given out. So people actually showed up to protest this. So we were covering it as members of the media. So the archival footage we had is our archives, and that's sort of an unusual situation to have been covering things for a period of time. So you can go back, 6 or 7 years and use your own footage. So I know that's a little bit unique.
That is a very, difficult thing if you're not like us, where you're covering this stuff. Yeah. To get footage that can be very painful.
Yes. And or expensive if you try to get it from like Hearst or something like that from a media org. They'll charge you an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one the whole questions about archival footage. It's been a big question over a lot of the interviews I've done this year. So it's something that I've been bringing up because so many people. It's been a question. So it's good to know exactly how much you used and how much you actually filmed yourself. You're the first ones that I've talked to where you're actually using some of your own archival footage, which is
Oh
very
yeah, extensively.
Yeah.
But that's only because we were uniquely positioned because we were video journalists
Right.
reporting
So,
on it, so we could just go back and use our own. And I think too, though, that's one factor too when you're thinking about doing a documentary is like what advantages do you have? Like one of the
that's such a good
advantages we
point.
have is that we're journalists covering stuff, so we have our own archives to draw from, and you should always think about that because access and resources is pretty important. I mean, being strategic about them. You know, I mean, Netflix or something, they can pay for whatever archival footage they want. They don't care. What's $50,000 to them? But for us, we got to think, you know, do we have access to stuff? Is there something special, some relationship or thing that we had that where we could use archive? In our case, you know, it was just we had shot it, so we can use it. But or someone else in our staff had shot it. There was a bunch of Freddie Gray stuff, protests that were shot by Cameron Grandino and Megan Sherman. And so, you know, we had access to all of that, and that makes a big difference. Big difference.
You know, I think, Stephen, you brought up such a good point, and that might be a help to filmmakers, which is that think about what advantage that you have because we are the the small upstarts, we're the indies. So what particular advantage do you have that you can leverage? In our case, it was that we had been videoing city council meetings and events in our city for a decade, so we had that kind of archival footage to reach for. But in the case of the other documentary we did, The Friendliest Town, an advantage we had was an inroad within the community. Now, there was a very small community, and we had access to it. Luckily, it was only a 3-hour drive. We became, I would say, very good friends with the church groups there, and they allowed us in. So I would say having that unique access, that relationship is something you can leverage as a filmmaker. So you think about what it is that you have, whether it's access, whether it's film, whether you have an ability to. Let's say you're really nimble. You can show up somewhere faster than anyone else. You can get there first. There's always some advantage that you might have. And if you, try to think about what that is and how you can leverage it to make your film the best it can be, and even to direct how you do your film.
We have this like little sort of saying that the first question on any project is how.
Not what, not why.
How can you do it? I can imagine right now there's probably 50 documentary filmmakers working on the Key Bridge collapse here in Baltimore. I would imagine they're like, and the first question you have to ask is how can we do this, and is it feasible? So I mean, especially if you're small, because you have you don't have the resources to go out and just make up for the fact that you don't have archival footage.
Right. I mean, if you're small, let's say, but you've been doing like short films your whole life, and like a friend of mine, Kelly McAdams, she's been a part of a group where filmmakers kind of exchange skills. Like you have someone who, if you're a director one time, you'll be the camera person another time, or you'll be the set designer another time. Everyone sort of exchanges their skills to help each other make films. Well, for example, let's say, wow, you think you're not going to be able to get archival footage, or there's something in a courtroom, and you know what, that courtroom doesn't have any cameras in it. Well, if you happen to be, one of those folks that's like really gifted with set design, or you have friends that help you with film, you can do a recreation. You know what I mean? So like everyone has a different set of skills that they can access, so that, okay, maybe I can't get access to that court footage, or maybe I can't get access to that archival footage, but I got a group of friends that can, make me create any scene I want. So I'm going to recreate it. So I think everyone can find an advantage. One of the things I like to tell ourselves is that these constraints that we have as independent filmmakers makes us more creative. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Most definitely. I will agree with you on that one. So all this being said, what was the most difficult aspect of making this film other than waiting the time in between when you first started shooting and when you last stopped shooting?
Making buildings look interesting.
Yeah, I would say that would be, I think it was, bridging the time gap and making it move, because it was getting the right balance between the setup, which I would say was before, the parts you're talking about where we go out and we look at the buildings and, kind of do exposition about what had happened. You know, we had filmed all the sort of setup, and it was like, to me, it was crossing that transom between past and present in the context of a film that's all happening now. So that was a complex. It looked simple when I finally finished it, but you know, but it was a question, because you're like crossing a bridge and you're saying, cross this bridge with me, and how do you make people do it? And when I did the countdown the first time, Taya was like, damn, that damn countdown, it goes on forever. And the point is not to show that you've been doing this film forever. It's just, so like there's a part where it goes 2019. I had it going on for like 10 minutes.
So you could like feel the passage of time a little too much.
And then Taya was like, why don't we make it? And then I condensed it and it worked much better. But like, I think that sort of, there, like, okay, so, you know, and also there's no culminating, you're creating your own culmination, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's no natural ending. Like in the Friendliest Town video we did, he gets convicted and, you know, it's a terrible story in some ways. And there's an end point. But this, there wasn't no, it's still ongoing. So you have to pick, you always want some sort of like definitive ending
Yes.
for a film. Because it just fits into with all the momentum of film. And so that part too was hard. Like I was like, well, how am I going to end this? Like, I'm not going to end it with them building a building and some guy selling it and having a check for $170 million. And, you know, that's not going to make sense. So we did this very unusual thing at the end of the film. We did sort of an emotional release, which is where we talk about We Are Worthy, that section of the film where I just happened to, well, I can tell the story really fast. I'm sorry. I don't want to take too much time. But I've been looking for a way to end the film visually. And I was taking my morning walk and I heard these drums. And I was like, oh my God. And Tay was like half asleep. And she was like, what is wrong with you? So I grabbed my camera.
He's yelling about drums in the phone. I'm like, what are you talking
about?
Yeah,
I'm like, they're drums. Because I thought Baltimore has this wonderful thing where they have these community sort of drum corps where people dance and then the drummers play, and I've been thinking about that, but all of a sudden I hear them when I'm walking. I'm like, where are they? So I start running. I get in my car and I'm like driving like a madman trying to find the drums, and I almost turn into like, and I'm like, the whole street's abandoned, and it turned out to be the Morgan State University homecoming parade, and I was like, oh my God! So I park my car and run. And they must have thought I was some sort of craze. The cops were looking at me like, is this guy about to like blow up the parade?
Oh my God.
Yeah, and so I shot that sequence, and then we did the music to it, and you know, I thought, well, that's the way I'm going to end it. I'm going to end it on an emotional note to let people know that, you know, the people of this town are worthy of something more than this, than what their leaders have constructed for them. That was most important to me, because I think that's what we have been taught in the cities we're not worthy. So that was very hard, but that ended up working out okay.
Stephen, that was such, when he showed me that video footage of all these young people wearing these beautiful purple and silver outfits and drumming and dancing in the sun. And I was just like, oh my God, we have the ending. And we have a way, as Stephen said, to give an emotional release, because we're talking about our city coffers being drained. We're talking about a system that has no change in sight. And so to be able to find a way to say, don't worry, we can still make it. We deserve better. Keep fighting. That's why I felt like what we said at the end with that video footage and with the song he created to go with it.
Okay. So this being said, the thing is, the thing is about your film is I like the fact that you guys put together a film that was a complex ideal. And that's something that a lot of filmmakers out there either don't know how to do, or they don't know how to do it in a way in which the narrative story actually plays out so people understand it, which you have achieved. The other thing is you didn't use archival footage, or you used your own archival footage. Another thing that we've been discussing this entire year, which has been a strange thing. The other thing is you came up, and I'm glad you talked about how you ended your film, because this story itself is something that is ongoing. It is nothing that you don't have a definitive end, and a lot of documentaries out there are like that. You may not come to a definitive end. I'm actually glad that you both said an emotional ending, because if you didn't say that, I was like, there are a lot of documentaries that just kind of end and you feel like cheated. So when you discuss an ideal that, you know, the poor neighborhoods and the poor people in Baltimore have been cheated by these businesses that have more or less gotten richer while everyone else has gotten poorer, you show this, you have this ending where it's okay. We're going to keep going on. We're going to keep fighting. Yet I don't think we've actually achieved trying to stop these rich people from still getting richer. But it's okay because we now, and like you've said before, you've educated people about this. So the people who are not educated about the tips and the pilots have now had their eyes open because your film has allowed them to see something that has always been underneath the surface. That's I forgot what my point was, but I want to make sure I saw that because when I'm watching the film, I saw most of that, and talking to you two now, I'm actually getting the bigger picture. One day I'm gonna tell people exactly what I do when I sit down and watching like 100 films within the course of a week.
Oh my God.
And so sometimes a lot of the ideas get jumbled in my head. And so when I'm talking to you filmmakers, everything starts to come clearer for me. And I'm glad that you two are able to create a film that makes the complex ideals clearer for an audience, because the filmmakers watching your film and listening to this conversation that we're having will have a better idea on how to achieve their ideals, their complex ideals, by watching you and listening to you.
Cool.
Well, I certainly hope
That's really
so.
nice to say, yeah.
And it was very kind of you to say that,
Yeah.
and I really do hope that we're able to provide some sort of catharsis, at the end.
Thank you.
I really do hope so.
There was a word I was looking for the whole time. I was like, you see, you're an investigative journalist, and you're the first investigative journalist I've ever interviewed. So this has been a very interesting conversation.
Cool.
I mean, I think people just remember that even in the most complex and dry sounding ideas, there is a story. And one of the things we have advantage as journalists, because we have to always break down complex ideas into a story. It's something that people, you can practice it and get better at it, believe it or not. You do find the story in this complex, because no matter how complex it seems, there's a simple narrative in it. There really is. And you can find it. It's just, it takes a lot of work. It's like kind of like having you're trying to do a sculpture and someone gives you a big block of a big block of like marble. And they're like, the sculpture, the shape is in there, the form. You just got to chip away.
Yeah.
That's
Chip away.
Yeah.
Keep chipping.
Yeah. Eventually, 5-6 years later.
Exactly.
But, yeah. So that's advice I would give people. Sorry.
Like Rodin. Rodin got these huge marble slabs and created these magnificent pieces of artwork.
Right. I think it was said, I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, that for Michelangelo, he would see the block and he would say he could see the figure in there. All he had to do was release it from the marble. Now,
of course, we're not putting ourselves in that.
Oh, no, that's not what we were trying to do.
It's just an analogy.
We're just saying keep chipping away at it. That's all we're saying.
Exactly. That's good.
Just want to make that clear.
Very clear.
All right. So, are there any final words you want to leave for anyone watching your film out there?
Oh, that's an interesting
question. That's really interesting.
What would be final words?
Final words. Well, I would say, every community has these kind of deals going on. Every community has some sort of development deals where people get tax breaks. They're much more widespread than you think. And if you watch our film and inspired, find out what's going on in your own community and make sure that that the people are getting a fair deal. I mean, because I don't think Baltimore's template is particularly egregious, but it goes on in more places than you could imagine. And so I would just say, if you watch it, take a look into your own, how development happens in your town or city.
I would agree with Stephen. I mean, Baltimore is, uniquely exploitative, and the corporations we deal with are uniquely predatory, but a lot of cities and towns have similar problems, similar forms of exploitation, similar forms of corporate predators. It might be in the form of environmental racism. They put in a giant incinerator in a Black community and kids are getting asthma. Whatever the story is, I would say, maybe consider looking at it as an investigative reporter. What is it that people don't know here? Can this information help people? Can this information I provide be utilized? And the other thing I would say is make sure it's something that you care about, So for us, giving people this information is really important to us. That's why we're journalists. So since a documentary project, especially if you're indie, especially if you're small, can take a long period of time, make sure this is something you really care about, that you love, that you're passionate about, because you're going to be putting all kinds of hours in. So make sure your heart's really in it.
And one other thing too, if you're stumped on something to make a piece work, just make sure you can write good music, because we use a lot of music to fill gaps in how people should feel or think. So that too.
Okay, so my last few words, because you just brought up something that I actually thought was really, really good with your film. Your music did help a lot, kind of set the mood and tone throughout the flow of the movie from the beginning and end, which I think helps because people are watching a film with complex ideals. So so congrats on that. I want to thank you both for coming out and allowing me to interview you for our DocuFest this year. I wish your film and you nothing but continued success as your film makes its festival rounds. Please keep us in line for any of your future projects. Everyone out there listening and watching, hopefully you've learned a lot from listening to this conversation. And please make sure to find Tax Broke, whatever film festival or website it is available at, because it is an eye-opening experience. And like my two guests did say, please take a look at your own community and figure out what story isn't being told that you can tell. With that, thank you all for coming out to Something Wicked DocuFest 2024 or any of our other events. Please check out the film, this film, and make sure to check out all of the other films that we've screened, and keep in touch with all the filmmakers out there if you want. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a pleasant weekend.